In 1986, the US military decided their land-based nuclear missiles were fatally exposed, spotted, and targeted with chilling precision by Soviet satellites. So they approved a plan to hide apocalypse-level weapons inside everyday trains, vanishing them across 200,000 miles of American rail. It sounds unbelievable, yet the Peacekeeper Rail Garrison was real. Why build a fleet of Doomsday Boxcars, and how close did this shadowy arsenal come to changing Cold War history? Rows of concrete silos once dotted the plains of North Dakota, silent and unmoving. For decades, these bunkers held America's most powerful weapons, the land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles that formed a cornerstone of nuclear defense. But by the 1980s, their greatest strength had become their fatal flaw. Soviet satellites, orbiting hundreds of miles above, watched every inch of the American heartland. Their cameras grew sharper each year, shrinking the margin of error from over half a kilometer in the 1970s to less than 250 meters by 1986. Soviet missile crews could now pinpoint a silo's location with chilling precision, inputting coordinates measured in fractions of a football field. Inside the Pentagon, generals pored over declassified images showing silo doors, access roads, even the shadows of maintenance crews. American intelligence analysts warned that the enemy's targeting accuracy, once blunt and imprecise, had become surgical. The phrase making its way through classified briefings was circular error probable, known as CEP. The old calculus of deterrence, which relied on the hardness of reinforced concrete and the vastness of the open prairie, no longer applied. A single Soviet missile with a CEP of 150 meters could destroy a silo hardened to withstand nearly anything short of a direct hit. With hundreds of warheads aimed at United States missile fields, the outcome of a first strike became a numbers game, and the numbers no longer favored the defenders. Historians describe this era as a moment when American strategy hit a wall. Fixed sights, once symbols of invincibility, had become bullseyes. The urgency inside the national security establishment was palpable. Every new advance in Soviet reconnaissance made the problem worse. The question was no longer if the silos could be destroyed, but how soon the enemy could pull the trigger. The United States needed a way to make its nuclear arsenal disappear, not underground, but into the everyday chaos of American life. On December 19, 1986, President Ronald Reagan signed an order that would reshape America's nuclear posture. The order, stamped with the authority of the White House, called for the creation of the Peacekeeper Rail Garrison. The idea was bold and simple. If the enemy could find every missile silo, then the answer was to make the missiles vanish into motion. Instead of waiting to be targeted, the nation's most powerful weapons would travel the rails, hidden among thousands of ordinary freight cars. The new doctrine drew inspiration from a classic shell game. 50 Peacekeeper missiles, each capable of carrying 10 warheads, would be split between reinforced silos and a new fleet of mobile trains. These trains, 25 in all, would blend into the vast American rail network, using more than 200,000 miles of track as their hiding place. In peacetime, the trains would stay tucked away in armored shelters on Air Force bases. But at the first sign of crisis, they would disperse, slipping into the daily flow of rail traffic. Soviet planners, faced with a target that could be anywhere, would have to guess among thousands of possibilities. The cost of a first strike would soar. To wipe out the mobile force, the enemy would need to attack every mile of track, every crossing, every switchyard, an impossible task. This move was not just about hardware, it was a calculated shift in the logic of deterrence. Military strategists argued that mobility meant survivability. A missile on the move could not be pinned down by satellite photos or targeted by coordinates memorized years before. The Pentagon's own documents put it plainly, the goal was to restore uncertainty, to force the enemy to hesitate. Congress had debated mobile basing for years, but the December 19, 1986 directive made it official. The Air Force would work with major defense contractors to turn the vision into reality. The Peacekeeper Rail Garrison was now a national priority, with the full weight of presidential authority behind it. Historians looking back see this as the moment when the Cold War's nuclear chessboard was redrawn, not with more missiles, but with a new way to hide them in plain sight. 25 trains. That was the number the Air Force settled on, a fleet large enough to scatter across the country, yet small enough to manage and conceal. Each train held the power to end cities, but on the outside they blended in with thousands of ordinary freight cars rolling through America every day. The scale of the hiding place was staggering. The United States rail network stretched over 200,000 miles, crossing deserts, mountains, and the concrete sprawl of cities. From the pine forests of the Pacific Northwest to the rail yards of the Midwest, rails laced through nearly every state. For Soviet planners, this was a nightmare. To track a single missile, they would have to watch not just one base or a handful of silos, but an entire continent's worth of track. The math was relentless. With 25 trains in motion, each capable of moving hundreds of miles in a single day, the possible locations multiplied into the millions. Even the most sophisticated satellites and surveillance planes could not keep up. At any given moment, a Peacekeeper missile could be passing through a remote canyon, parked in a suburban siding, or hidden among a line of boxcars waiting for a signal to move. Railroads had always been the veins of American industry, moving grain, coal, and cars from coast to coast. Now they offered something new: camouflage on a national scale. Every crossing, every switch, every tunnel became part of the shell game. The odds of finding and destroying all 25 trains before they could launch were effectively zero. The numbers told the story: 200,000 miles of track, 25 trains, 50 missiles. For the first time, the country's nuclear arsenal would be protected not by concrete and secrecy, but by the sheer size and complexity of the American landscape. The enemy would have to guess, and in the world of nuclear strategy, guessing meant hesitation, and hesitation could mean survival. Aboard each Peacekeeper train, life was anything but ordinary. The crew, about 40 people per train, lived in a world of constant vigilance and routine, surrounded by the quiet threat of what they carried. Security police, maintenance technicians, missile operators, and support staff made up this rolling community. Their mission was simple and relentless: keep the missile ready, keep the train moving, and keep their presence hidden from anyone who might be watching. Training for this job meant more than learning procedures. In 1988, Air Force security police spent a full week at Norton Air Force Base, living and working on a simulated garrison train. Exercises ran day and night, testing how crews would handle weeks or months on alert, far from home, with no set endpoint. They practiced everything from emergency repairs to perimeter defense, rehearsing what to do if someone tried to sabotage the rails or breach the train. Every shift, guards rotated through sensor stations, scanning for threats on the tracks or in the dark beyond. Weapons lockers held heavy machine guns and grenade launchers, tools meant to repel any attack, no matter how determined. Daily life blurred the line between routine and readiness. Crews slept in bunks stacked inside armored cars, ate together in narrow galley kitchens, and kept to a strict schedule. Even downtime was shaped by the mission. Maintenance teams inspected the missile's launch systems, checked the train's mechanical health, and drilled for every possible failure. Security details patrolled the length of the train, always alert to the possibility of sabotage, because a single act of tampering could cripple the entire deterrent. Isolation was part of the job. For weeks, the only world that existed was the train itself, sealed off from the outside. The constant pressure forged a kind of quiet camaraderie, but it also revealed the system's vulnerabilities. A train could move, but it could also be stopped, derailed, or delayed. Every mile traveled brought new risks, forcing the crew to rely on discipline, training, and each other. The human element was both the shield and the soft spot in this rolling fortress, raising hard questions that engineers would have to answer in steel and circuitry. A standard boxcar hauls about 50 tons of cargo and rides on 4 axles. The Peacekeeper launch car was an entirely different beast, 87 feet long, tipping the scales at over 200,000 pounds when loaded. Fitting a 70-foot missile inside meant rethinking every part of the railcar from the ground up. The challenge started with weight. American railroads are built for heavy loads, but nothing in civilian freight matched the demands of a rolling missile silo. Engineers calculated the axle load. A regular boxcar spreads its weight across 4 wheels on each side, but the Peacekeeper's mass would have crushed the rails. The solution was to double up, using 8 axles per launch car, each one absorbing a slice of the burden, keeping the car from sinking into the track or snapping a rail under stress. Stability mattered just as much. At launch, a 100-ton missile would have to rise vertically from the car, generating massive forces that could tip or twist the entire train. To counter this, designers borrowed a trick from heavy lift cranes and added deployable outriggers. These steel legs would swing out and anchor the car to the ground, widening its base and locking it in place. With outriggers deployed, the launch car could absorb the recoil and channel the energy safely into the earth below. Every detail was a compromise between concealment and raw physics. The result was a rolling fortress, quiet on the outside, engineered for a single, violent act. The numbers told the story: 70 feet of missile, 200,000 pounds of steel, 8 axles, and a footprint designed to tame forces that would rip an ordinary boxcar apart. Launching a missile from a moving train demanded a new kind of physics. Lighting a rocket engine inside a rail car would have turned the entire train into a fireball. The answer was a method borrowed from submarine missiles and perfected for the rails: a cold launch. Instead of igniting the Peacekeeper's main engine while it sat inside the launch tube, engineers designed a system that used high-pressure steam. At the moment of launch, a burst of steam would blast the 71-foot missile straight up and out of the car, like a cork popping from a bottle. Only after the missile cleared the launch tube would its engines ignite, far above the fragile machinery and steel below. This was not just theory. In October 1990, the Air Force rolled out the prototype launch car and put the cold launch system to the test. The missile's canister was loaded, the car's outriggers locked into the ground, and the steam ejection system primed. On command, the steam charge fired, sending the canister rocketing upward in a controlled arc. The missile cleared the car exactly as the engineers had hoped. Sensors tracked every movement, confirming that the forces were contained and the train remained stable. Engineers and test crews watched the data come in, relief mixing with pride. Years of calculations and sleepless nights had paid off. The cold launch system worked, and with it, the dream of a mobile, hidden nuclear deterrent seemed within reach. But as the technical triumph faded, new questions gathered on the horizon. The world outside the test site was changing fast. In 1991, the Peacekeeper Rail Garrison program came to a sudden halt. The Cold War, which had shaped every detail of its design, was ending in real time. The Berlin Wall had fallen. Soviet troops were leaving Eastern Europe. In Washington, arms control negotiators hammered out the terms of the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, START 1, with Russian counterparts. The treaty set strict new limits on deployed nuclear warheads and delivery systems, and the political appetite for more mobile intercontinental ballistic missiles evaporated almost overnight. Defense budgets shrank as policymakers scrambled to claim a peace dividend. The United States Air Force, once so committed to the rail garrison concept, found its top priority swept aside by new realities. As one policy analyst later wrote, the program was a product of its time. When the threat changed, so did the answer. By the end of the year, the order came down to cancel the rail garrison. Only a handful of prototype cars had ever been built. The rest of the fleet never left the drawing board, a casualty of history's fast forward. What began as a technical triumph ended as an artifact, proof that even the most ambitious engineering can be undone by a shift in global politics. The Peacekeeper Rail Garrison lives on, not in motion, but as a relic of Cold War ambition. In Dayton, Ohio, the National Museum of the United States Air Force houses the only surviving prototype launch car. It arrived in 1994, a few years after the program was cancelled, preserved as a silent witness to an era when the threat of nuclear war shaped every detail of American defense. The car's immense size and reinforced frame remain intact, a physical reminder of the engineering that once aimed to keep a nation safe by making its deadliest weapons invisible. Standing beside the artifact, a museum curator explains that this car was more than a display. It was proof that the concept worked. The launch system, the cold launch mechanism, the disguised exterior, all were tested and validated before the world changed. The curator points out that every panel and every bolt was designed to meet military standards, yet today the car draws visitors for a different reason. It anchors the story in something real, encouraging researchers and the curious alike to dig deeper. The museum invites those who want to know more to explore its archives, where the full record of the Rail Garrison program waits for anyone willing to look. Today, nuclear weapons still move across borders, sometimes hidden, sometimes in plain sight. The technology that once blended missiles into freight traffic now inspires new debates about mobility, secrecy, and control. As global arsenals grow less predictable, the real arms race is about staying unseen. The tracks may be quiet, but the stakes remain urgent. What would you hide in plain sight?